should the U.S. have some kind of guarantee or return on the billions of taxpayer dollars that have flowed into that conflict?
Well, Shannon, I have two problems with that concept. One, it just looks like an episode of The Sopranos, right? Give us your minerals or we're not going to help you fight a bloody butcher. I mean, is this really what we want the greatest country in history to be known for like, some mafia thing? Look, we've always stood with the good guys. We stood with Churchill against Hitler in World War I. We stood with the good guys. Even when we've gotten it wrong in Vietnam, we were standing with the good guys against the Viet Cong. In Iraq, we were going after Saddam Hussein. Now this president is standing with the bad guy. He's saying Zelensky is the problem, when Zelensky, with very few resources, is trying to stand up for democracy against a totalitarian butcher. What really worries me, Shannon, though, is what do you think President Xi is thinking? Because President Xi wakes up every single morning thinking, is today the day I go into Taiwan, right? And he says, look at that. Donald Trump stands with the authoritarian invaders, not with the people who are being invaded. And now you're talking about the real possibility that American troops get involved in something that was facilitated by the mafia-like activities of Donald Trump.
Okay, just a couple of things there. First of all, Secretary of Defense just told us, when I asked him point blank, any chance any U.S. troops get involved on the ground in this, he said absolutely not. So we will hold him to that promise and to that statement that he's made very clearly here. But also on this issue of the loans, you characterize it as feeling very mafia-like, but would you characterize that as well with the deals that the European leaders made with Ukraine that do give them guarantees?
Look, Shannon, I would hope that when the moment for reconstruction comes in Ukraine, and it will come, that it will be remembered that the United States stepped up to help Ukraine defeat Russia, right? Now, by the way, I heard the Secretary of Defense say we've just been handing them aid and handing them aid. No, we have not. It took us a year because of Republicans in Congress to get Ukraine the aid that they needed to fight off the Russians. And in that year, the Russians killed thousands of Ukrainians that didn't need to die because the United States Congress was dithering over whether we should help, again, the good guy here. So the facts are just plain wrong. But yeah, of course, when Ukraine is rebuilt, I would hope that we would get, a significant slice of that business. But Shannon, we've never done this before. We never went to Winston Churchill and said, hey, unless you give us half of London to build hotels, we're not going to help you against Hitler. Imagine the signal that sends to the people who are doing the fighting and dying. What does Zelensky say? Zelensky's not losing money. He's losing thousands of people a week. And he doesn't even get invited by Donald Trump to the peace conference. Again, I would ask you to think about what the folks in Taiwan are thinking about this right now. Because if I was in Taiwan, I would be like, oh, my God, the country that is supposedly my protector is now going to side with China when they come knocking on our door.
Well, we have made clear that is not our foreign policy, but we'll talk about that more in the show when it comes to Taiwan and China. To the issue, though, also in the Middle East, since we're on foreign policy, I want to talk to you about what's going on in Israel. More hostages released. Now we've got to get to the second phase and third phase of negotiating what is essentially a very fragile ceasefire there. Newsweek has this headline: the two-state solution died with Ariel and Kafir Bibas, meaning the 9-month-old and the 4-year-old boy whose bodies were paraded through the streets as they were returned to Israel. Where do we go from here in the Middle East?
Yeah, Shannon, as it happens, I just spent a week in Israel and had about 2 hours with the Prime Minister, and I think the two-state solution died not with the murder, the brutal murder of these hostages, but frankly, it's been on life support for a very long time, and the Hamas attack, the brutal attack on Israel on October 7th, 500-plus days ago, probably ended that. But, here's the thing. I don't know what's going to happen in the next week or so, 2 weeks. My guess is actually that Israel will go back in. You just can't see hostages treated the way these hostages have been treated and be the Prime Minister and say, okay, we're going to figure out how to end this. I think he's going back in after Hamas. And look, Hamas needs to be taken out of the equation. What does worry me, though, is that, even if the two-state solution is dead, there needs to be some solution, right? There are millions of Palestinians who are enraged. I talked to a lot of them. They are enraged, right? And Israel will never be secure as long as they are living in a very small sliver of land with millions of enraged Palestinians. Set aside who's right, who's wrong here. That's just not a recipe for stability. So I do hope that the Prime Minister and the Israeli leadership can get together with the Palestinian leadership, not Hamas, the Palestinian Authority, and say, let's start making some progress to take down the level of rage and therefore the violence, and then figure out what the actual solution is to this problem.
Yeah, we know that Arab leaders met in Saudi a couple of days ago trying to come up with their own plan for what will hopefully be progress in that region and moving forward. Domestically, before we let you go, I want to talk about the fact that there's obviously been a lot of pushback, and I'll talk to Chairman Jordan about this, about DOGE and about the cuts and the layoffs and all kinds of things. And there's been a lot of consternation with the president's use of executive power from his perch there in the executive branch. But a piece of the Federalist says this: Democrats' beef isn't with executive power, it's with Trump and his voters. They go on to say that, you know, President Biden clearly continually tried to overturn the parameters of presidential power. He repeatedly sought to shift student debt to the general taxpayer. Even after the Supreme Court ruled against him, he opened the border in violation of his constitutional obligation to enforce the law. They go on to say Democrats' real grievance is with last November's voters, who overwhelmingly rejected Democrats' distorted dystopian view of what America should be. Talk about it all the time on the show here. Voter analysis showed us people wanted major upheaval. So is your issue really with the voters more so than the president? Because there have been times that Democrats were fine with use of executive power, and rather broadly.
Look, every president gets turned back by the Supreme Court. Every president does. And you're right to point out that Biden was turned back on the student loan thing. And you know what Biden said? Biden said, no problem. I will abide by the court. As you know, President Trump tweeted, nothing is illegal.
I don't want to escape past that. He actually then went out and did a number of other programs that actually gave out billions in student loan forgiveness.
Right, that were not deemed illegal. So he did what he wanted to do, but when the court said you can't do it this way, he did it in a way that the court ultimately said was a legal way to do it. Now, you may not like student loan forgiveness. That's fine. That's a policy position. The point is there was never any question about whether he was going to abide by the law. President Trump, in contrast, says, you know, if I'm doing it for the good of the country, I decide what the law is. And, of course, he's done it a lot more than Biden did. But here, look, my problem is not with Trump voters. My problem is, and as a Democrat, I'll be the first one to tell you that the federal government, the bureaucracy, can absolutely use a diet. But the way DOGE has done it, where he's just indiscriminately gone in and particularly focused on firing young people who are often the most energetic, the most determined to make a difference, there's two things that America is forgetting right now, although I would tell you, ask Jim Jordan about what Republicans are hearing in their town hall meetings right now, because the people in those town hall meetings are realizing that the federal bureaucracy actually keeps the plane flying, keeps, you know, viruses out of our meat. If there's ever a pandemic, it's going to be the CDC that they rely on to keep us safe. And when you just go in with a buzz of the chainsaw that you saw Musk waving around, you know, that's a real problem. And by the way, Shannon, what about inflation? I think the reason people are giving my Republican colleagues a hard time is because Donald Trump said, I'm taking inflation down. Inflation has gone up. And that's a problem. All
right, we're a month in, and I will talk about all those things with Congressman Jordan. So, Congressman Himes, thank you very much for your time. Let's pick up there, Congressman Jordan.